Hey, good morning, comrades. We're going to talk about the third book in the selection series that I finished recently. I was talking to my wife about this because she's the one who got this book from some lady in the book club that she's in. And this lady was like, I love this book series. I read it every year. And my first comment to my wife after finishing the trilogy, there's two more, but they're about like the daughter was, I don't understand. Nothing happens. The first book is the best, easily, because it introduces a bunch of stuff and it sets a bunch of stuff up. And as long as you don't have any anticipation that any of this stuff's going to get resolved in like a satisfying manner, then it's like interesting to kind of like have this thought process about what is going on and what is potentially going to happen in the future. But the Elite, which is the second book, and I talked about this before, literally nothing happens in that entire book. Like, they start off with 6, and at the end I think there's only 4 left. But aside from that singular change, there's still the same back and forth between Maxon and America. Aspen is still like around just because we have to have a love triangle for reasons. And there's no satisfying conclusion to that either. It just kind of like gets hand-waved away at some point. Like, that's not a big deal. Like, there's like a moment of drama in the one at the very end of the book where it's like, oh, I knew this was the guy you were dating before. Oh, it's okay, I forgive you, I don't care. And then the guy is like, oh, I'm actually in love with someone else. I was just sticking with you because I'm loyal and stuff. It's like, what? Why? Why any of those? So 85% of the one is just a continuation of the Elite. We drop 2 ladies, and then there's some reconciliation between, like, specifically Celeste, who's like the main antagonist, I guess, outside of like the quote-unquote Southern rebels, who are just portrayed as being cartoonishly villainous. Same thing with the King. So we have 2 villains, right? We have 2 antagonists in this story, besides America's indecisiveness. And one is the Southern rebels, because the Northern rebels are pure of heart, and they just want to get rid of the caste system. And the head of the Northern rebels is actually the true descendant of Ilya, while the current monarchy is ran by people who are of like the cousins or something, because they thought everyone died or something. We get all this like backstory very quickly, like in the middle of the book at some point. So Maxon allies himself with the Northern rebels, which is helpful because, but again, I don't know about again. So this book is not incompetently written, is the issue. It's just not well written. So stuff is brought up, and generally it's resolved. Oftentimes it's resolved stupidly or just kind of like hand-wavily, but it is resolved. And then sometimes stuff's just like brought up, and it's like, okay. Like, it's like stuff was written about in the first book or second book, and then here at the third book, and again, this is all in like the last 10% of the third book. Most of the third book is just like America and Maxon going back and forth, and still going back and forth. Oh, I love you. Oh, I don't know. Oh, blah, blah, blah. Oh, blah, 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 blah. And then like the girls becoming somewhat closer, and like you get like maybe like a page or 2 per one of the other. So out of this like hundreds of pages long book, you get like 9 pages for like the other girls to like develop them as characters somewhat. And to me, it's like there's no reason to do this. You're not going to spend enough time to actually develop them as characters and have us care about them even slightly. So just don't waste the time. And that's most of this, right? Like, we find out at some point, like, America's dad gets killed by the Southern rebels, and we find out that, and then she like realizes that he was part of like the Northern Rebellion because he had a history book. And there's like a symbol that comes up out of nowhere in like the middle of the book, and she's like, oh. And then she also realizes that Chris, who's one of like the Elite, is also part of like the Northern Rebellion. And it just seems like everybody at some point outside of America herself and like the monarchy are like a part of the Northern, like everybody. Like there's like, oh, that person and this person and she knew and he knew. Oh, it all makes sense. And I'm like, none of this makes sense. None of this makes any sense whatsoever. This is all stupid garbage. So there's not much to talk about for plot. Like, nothing happens, and then right at the end, America's dad dies, so she goes back, And then her brother like calls her out on being in a relationship with Aspen because Aspen's there with her, obviously, because he's like Maxon's favorite guard because reasons. Because he's the best, most handsome, and brave. Anyway, so then when she comes back, Maxon's decided she essentially gave him an ultimatum, and then Maxon essentially has chosen her, right? But they have to have a ceremony. He kicked like 2 of the girls out, and then there's like Chris and her left, and. Something else happens where they do like a broadcast, and then everyone, like the Italians love her, and then she says something else where everyone's like, "Oh, we love her," so she's the most popular again. So the king like continually like taunts her from like the shadows. But this thing, he like taunts her from the shadows like 3 times in the entire book, maybe twice, and then he comes to an ignominious end. So like problem solved, off screen. Right, and this is the Southern Rebels. Like, there's the Southern Rebels. Like, there's like the crowning ceremony where Max is going to choose America, but then he sees like America and Aspen like standing close to each other, and he just assumes that they're having sex behind his back, and he's like, "Whatever, I'm done. I'm going to choose this other girl." And he throws like a hissy fit, which I mean he's like 18, so whatever. Right? That's forgivable. I don't think a lot of thought was put into it per se. I think I'm putting more thought into it than the author, to be honest. I'm giving her more credit, probably is due. But he's 18. These kids are like teenagers, right? They're stupid teenagers, and so they're being very dramatic about like nothing, essentially. About my life is over. And it's like, bro, you were like lowest on the caste system, and you showed up, and now you're either going to marry this guy who clearly doesn't love you, which we find out about later, this Aspen guy, or Maxon. So you're gonna go from like one of the lowest castes to like the highest caste or the second highest caste. Like your life is like what is it? Unimaginably better forever, and your whole family is also raised up. So, like, get over yourself. But she's a teenager, so forgive him. Okay, so he throws a hissy fit, and he's like, "I'm gonna choose Chris." And then, thank goodness, the Southern Rebels decided at that point to like attack. And so there's a big like to do, and Celeste gets shot in the back of the head to start off like the rebellion's attack, which is supposed to be, and it's very clearly supposed to be like, "Oh no, not Celeste." And in my head I was like, like it's the only unfortunate part about it is she's the only one in the entire story with a character arc. Like, she starts off as a total bitch, right? Tearing sleeves, getting people kicked out, starting fights, being completely ruthless, and then again, in like the 3 pages, she has character development, that's it. She has 3 pages. She goes from completely unredeemable to like America's new best friend forever, right? And it's just like, oh, you gotta see things from my angle. I'm so used to just having whatever I want, and I might not get this, and it makes me sad. And then America's like, oh, I see things from her angle now, and I'm like, no, she's still a cunt. she's still a spoiled cunt. Like, what? But then Celeste is like, I'm rooting for you, America. And then they become like best friends forever, like squeezing hands and like chit chatting and stuff. I'm like, all right. And then she gets killed, and I'm like, I guess I'm supposed to care that she got killed. I mean, I care more that she got killed than like the other 2, which are also unlikable and like whatever. But only because it's like, oh, she had a change. She had like a slight arc. We also in this book meet this girl, Polly or something, and she was like a 4. And then, like, her aunt, and this is literally, again, it's like a 3-page kind of, like, explanation, where it's like America and Maxon go out with Aspen to, like, meet the Northern Rebels and coordinate something, and then on their way back, they get, like, attacked by Southern Rebels, and then America gets shot in the arm, but just, like, grazed. Like, she's fine. They like, stitch her up, and there's no problems. Because that's how gunshots work. But while she's, like, running away from the fight, she bumps into this like homeless girl. This girl like tells her story, and it's like the best part. It's the best writing in the entire series. So it's like, well, this author can clearly write like a captivating tale that is like very show, not tell. Everything else is very tell, not show. But I mean, she has the capability to do this. It's just she needs a little more effort into it. But this girl, like, she went from like being a 4, and then like her dad died, and her grandma left all the stuff to her aunt who was supposed to raise her, but then her aunt was like physically and emotionally abusive, so she took some money and left, and then because she was living on like the street, she got robbed immediately, and then she was like starving to death, and then And these prostitutes were like, hey, you should come with us, at least you can survive. And so then she becomes a prostitute, but if she's not like bringing in like the dough, she gets beat. So it's like this really terrible like story. And it's the first time that I'm like, oh, the caste system's bad. Besides people just telling me it's bad, like, oh, it's so bad. And then you like meet these people and everyone's like dressed and eating and like doing their thing, and like, I gotta work real hard. It's like, yeah, bro, we all gotta work real hard. Like, fuck. Your life sounds pretty optimal, right? And then it's like, if you get drafted, it's like winning the lottery, because now you gotta go be a 2. And then like Aspen's like, oh, I don't want to join the lottery because stuff could happen. And it's like, now I'm serving in the King's Guard, and I'm like the number 1 guy in the whole country, and I was like a 7 or a 6 or whatever. And it's like, life is good. Right? And it's like, man, this society really doesn't seem that bad. And this caste system, I mean, the caste systems are horrible according to modern sensibilities. But it's like, it depends like what's going on, but they honestly maybe not always that bad. Right, like that's an argument. That's a discussion to be had. Like if you're going to like be like a caste, that like a different form of political system would need to exist in a different like climate and atmosphere than like perfect harmony, where like the American government can just like randomly decide they're going to go to war because they want to increase like stock prices for certain companies. Like, and you'd be like, oh, the caste system's the worst thing ever. And it's like, is it though? It's like monarchies too. Like, oh, how could we not have a democracy? No one has a democracy. But how could we pretend that we have a democracy? How could anyone ever think a monarchy would be better? It's like, monarchies are way better in a lot of ways, as long as you have like a good king. In the past, like, this is how we got to where we're at because of monarchies and feudalism and anarchistic societies and stuff. So I don't know. Anyway, that's a whole side conversation. But again, it's a lot of modern sensibilities to this like completely like alien political system that just happens to be America like hundreds of years in the future. I don't know. But castes are bad because I believe so today, not because it is relevant to like the world at which this exists. And again, this is like the greatest crimes of this book series. Well, the greatest crime is it's super boring and nothing matters. The second greatest crime is it's just like it builds like this world that is not consistent with how the world exists. So it's just kind of like whatever. Anyways, where was I? Oh yeah, so she gets back. Oh, and then the rebels show up. And then Maxon gets shot protecting America because he truly loves her and he can never not choose her, and that's where his heart lies. And then she's like crying, and then Aspen like takes her and locks her up in a room, and then she just waits there. And then when she comes out, everything is exactly the way it is. So she sits in a room for like a day, and then when she gets released from this room and comes out, everything is perfect. Like, the king is dead, thank goodness. Fuck that guy, right? The rebels have been completely wiped out because I guess they all attacked in like their minuscule force, and the guard will clearly outmatch them 1,000% with the help of the northern rebels who were also just hanging out because reasons. So victory. So that antagonist is gone. The king is gone. The southern rebels are gone. Maxon is getting rid of the caste system. Aspen reveals that, oh, don't worry, America, you can choose. I think you should definitely choose Maxon because I don't actually love you. I loved one of your maids this whole time, and I was just pretending to love you to be an asshole. But it's noble of me because I was being loyal and shit. Like, okay, you just said you're coming off as like a real asshole. Just throw that out there, like a real asshole. And then Maxon's like, oh, all's forgiven, all the lies and deceit, and you going behind my back because I love you and I love you forever, and everything's gonna be great. And then the book just like ends, and it's like, okay. And then looking ahead, the next book is about their daughter and her selection, obviously. But it's like 20 years later, so it's like, okay, I guess everything was great. So, awesome. Victory. Lord, sorry. So that's the one, and that's the Selection trilogy. It's not good. I would not recommend reading it at all. It's super boring. There's nothing. And again, there's a lot of little stuff that's just like she calls out Chris on being a Northern Rebel at the very end of the book. And it's like, oh, you're wearing this necklace. That means you're a Northern Rebel. And Chris is like, you got me. And then they like giggle, and that's like the end of it. And it's like, why would you even bring this up? I know why. Because again, it's not incompetently made, which is like good, I guess. Because at some point, she's in a meeting with Maxon and the Northern Rebels, and the Northern Rebels like, well, we want America, but if not America, we have somebody else who's a plant in there who will like want the same stuff. And it's like, why would you want America, who's like you have no relation to, when you have this other woman who's like in first place at some point, and she is part of the Northern Rebellion as the backup, right? And why doesn't she know about the plan to put America in there? Because that's what they want most. Like, it's like, what is going on? Oh my gosh! So it's so stupid. And it's just like, it makes things more complicated. It's one of those things where it's like you added something because at some point the rebels are like, we have somebody else in there, and then America gets concerned about it for 5 seconds, and then it like comes up at the very end because you're not going to like write about it. It's just like it's writing 101. You're not going to bring something up and then just never talk about it again. That's not how you rate things, right? That's just like, why are you bringing? But at the same time, it's like, what? This had no consequence to the story. It's like, it's that meme where you have like the bell curve, and you have like the complete retard on one end and like the Jedi Master on the other end, and in the middle is like Bojack or whatever. And then on the outside, it's like, don't bring up stuff that's irrelevant. Like, don't expand characters unnecessarily. And in the middle is like, oh, we have to bring up every character's got to be relevant. There's got to be plot stuff and whatever. And it's like, no, you don't need to. If you're a good writer, you just don't bring stuff up if it's not going to cater to the story. If it's not going to add something to the story or character development. And like, not most of the stuff, I don't want to say percentages, most of the stuff in this book that's like brought up and then resolved, if you got rid of it, like her dad being in the Northern Rebellion, if you never brought that up ever, it would have zero impact on the story. So like the fact that you bring it up and then you like kind of resolve it is like, okay, cool, but what? There's no character development. It didn't move the plot forward. It didn't like change anything. It had no relevance. It didn't like expand upon anything or make you. It's just like, here's some like fucking facts. Eat your shit, you assholes. Like it comes across as very like, why is this here? Like, what the fuck is this? And that's the problem with this book series. The biggest problem. No, the biggest problem is it's boring. The second biggest problem, again, is it's like, it brings up all this shit that is completely irrelevant and does nothing to expand characters or the plot. Which is like, what? That's the story. The story is the plot, and then character development. You could have a story with very little plot, but a lot of character development, like Pride and Prejudice. Right? Or you could have a story with a lot of plot, and then not so much character development, you know? Which would be, I mean, Lord of the Rings is pretty good both, but it's more like that, right? If you just have like characters that exist, but the plot's moving forward and it's exciting and adventure stuff's going on. I mean, ideally it'd be like Lord of the Rings, right? Where you have like bits of character development and everything's relevant and important, and then you have like a story progressing forward. But this has like, it has like a plot that's like, this whole thing could have been resolved in like a novella, right? It's like, oh, this starts and then it ends. You just get rid of the rebellion thing. The rebellion thing almost had nothing to do with anything. Like, the only reason the Southern Rebellion is important is because of the teenage drama. It like, what is it? It's like Deus Ex Machina solves the problem at the end. But the problem was made up. It didn't need to exist. There didn't need to be... If Aspen never showed up, this would have never been a problem. Right? So Aspen did show up. If Aspen was honest and was like, I don't really care for you that much, I'm just here because I feel like I have to be. And it's like, bro, you're fucking around with this girl like real hard. Like, you're an asshole. Like, you're not noble. And it portrays him as being very noble and like all this shit. And it's like, no, bro, you're in love with like a different woman. Like, maybe not from the get-go, but pretty early it seems. And then there's like a maid who also likes Aspen, who's not the maid he actually likes, and she gets killed too off screen. It's like, problem solved. Anyway, I'm not talking about this shit. All right, catch y'all later. Bye.